Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, we have to talk about Forretress. Forretress was already a meta Open Great League Pokemon, and this season it just got better. Sand Tomb now does way more damage than it did in previous seasons, which means Forretress now has a meaningful way to hit Steel types. Rock Tomb did get a 5 damage decrease, but overall Forretress is improved, and this was already a very strong Pokemon to begin with. Today's team goes back to basics: Malamar, Double Steel, Malamar, Empoleon, and Forretress, and I believe I went 9-2 across the 11 games that I ran with this team. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and in Game 1, we're off to a bit of a tricky start, leading Malamar into Empoleon. Unfortunately, I end up lagging to start with, so I end up missing a Psywave. I wanted to try and catch that Hydro Cannon onto Empoleon, but unfortunately, I end up missing the Psywave, so I stay in, tank the damage, and connect with Superpower. I send in my own Empoleon, my opponent sends in Gourgeist, and this is a very valuable bait out for me, as Gourgeist would absolutely destroy the Forretress in the back, Incinerate double super effective, so seeing this here is incredibly helpful. Gourgeist has enough for the Shadow Ball, they go for the Seed Bomb bait, and that's going to force me to fire off my Drill Peck after only 2 Metal Sounds to ensure that they do not make another move. Gourgeist is going to let itself get KO'd, and in the back is Shadow Drapion. The moment I see Shadow Drapion, I know this game is already over, as Forretress is about to absolutely delete this Pokemon with Bug Bites. However, we're going to overfarm by 4 and then get the catch onto the Malamar. We were already in a completely winning position, but that should secure it. I'm going to wait down my timer and then bring back in the Empoleon. They only have an Aqua Tail Bank, so if they try for the Crunch, which they do, they're going to be losing charge attack priority to Empoleon. This Hydro Cannon will be guaranteeing the final shield, and now I have a shield advantage Forretress, which is one of the most disgusting things you can have in this meta. So in comes Forretress, and look at the Bug Bites go. Bug Bites absolutely melting the Drapion, and I just simply do not have to shield. Drapion baited with the Aqua Tail, they're just simply not getting to another charge move. I have the Sand Tomb loaded, and my opponent is going to resign the match. We pick up a pretty solid lead in the next match, Malamar into Jellicent. Jellicent is so incredibly oppressive neutrally that even a type advantage matchup like with Malamar, Jellicent can still make it very close. The good news for me is that I always outpace the Jellicent, so I fire off the Foul Play, that connects, and I'm going to be shielding up their Shadow Ball. My opponent is going to be pivoting out into Galarian Stunfisk, and I'm more than happy to stay on the field with Malamar. I farm up, threatening big damage with Superpower, but I will go for the Foul Play bait. I want to keep my defense stat intact, because I'm pretty confident that even if they go for the Earthquake, I should be able to survive. Earthquake lands, that did do quite a lot of damage. I'm unable to get the Zero Turn swap out, so I just stay in to go for the Superpower. That does a lot of damage onto the Stunfisk. In comes Empoleon, and I should be able to overfarm by 1 and get the CMP tie Hydro Cannon to their second Earthquake. Hydro Cannon would easily knock out the low HP Stunfisk. They're forced to put up the shield, but I've already done so much damage to the Jellicent that if they send it in, which they do, I can now overfarm, throw a 6 Metal Sounds, CMP tie Drill Peck to the Shadow Ball, and they've lost enough health that Drill Peck will actually be knocking them out. That is incredibly helpful because I still have basically a full HP Empoleon. In the back, my opponent has a Bug Bite Forretress of their own, and I should just be in a completely winning position. Hydro Cannon is going to land. I'm going to try and get fancy and go for a Sand Tomb catch. My opponent didn't end up throwing the Sand Tomb, but the good news is we're still just so far ahead that this game is going to be a win. I can wait down the timer and now bring in my own Forretress. The Bug Bites are resisted, but they do add up. Whether my opponent goes for the Sand Tomb or the Rock Tomb, either way, I should be in a pretty good spot. They go for the Sand Tomb, they send in Galarian Stunfisk. I can fire off the Sand Tomb before Stunfisk is able to make a Rock Slide, and from here, this game is just over. Back in comes my opponent's Forretress, and they will concede the match. Very scary lead in the next match, Malamar into Forretress. I stay in to check the fast move, and they are on Volt Switch. I do think that Volt Switch is a very viable fast move choice for Forretress. For this team, I opted for the regular Forretress and to go for Bug Bite, but I do think that you could very easily go for Volt Switch or go for the Shadow Forretress as long as you're running Sand Tomb and Rock Tomb. I'm able to successfully Foul Play bait on the first, and that's going to let me set up a Superpower. This is debuffed, but it will still do a solid chunk of damage to my opponent. My hope is that they try and farm me down, because I'm going to try and snipe them with Bug Bites. So I pivot into the Forretress, snipe them down, and they lose a massive amount of energy. In comes Jellicent, and this is a matchup where you can actually get a Bug Bite breakpoint if you throw a Sand Tomb. And once you do throw that Sand Tomb, you'll notice the Bug Bites are really not doing much. Wait until after this Sand Tomb. Suddenly, these Bug Bites are about to eat Jellicent alive. Sand Tomb is going to land, and look at the fast move pressure. Oh my goodness! Forretress absolutely shredding through what should be one of its worst matchups. Shadow Ball will be shielded. I'm going to fire off the Sand Tomb, anticipating that my opponent will put up the shield. Sand Tomb, I believe, is now a 40-40 move, which means it's not an incredible move, but it's so much better than the 25-40 that it was last season. Surf is going to land. My opponent sends in Shadow for Alligator. I debated going for the Sand Tomb, but I figured the guaranteed win condition was to go for the Rock Tomb. Rock Tomb is going to pressure a shield out of my opponent, and now that they're debuffed, they really can't do much of anything to the Empoleon. Hydro Cannon lands, Empoleon will not get two-shot, and that is very, very helpful. I'll get to connect with the Drill Peck, and Drill Peck is going to put them at critically low HP. Ralligator will fire off the Hydro Cannon. Hydro Cannon is going to be getting that Empoleon very, very low. There's the pivot out into Jellicent. I tried for the Metal Sound down. Unfortunately, I could not quite get it. Luckily, I'm still in a winning spot because my switch timer's up. I can pivot into the Forretress, snipe down for Alligator with Bug Bites, and take the win. Picking up a bad lead in the next match, leading Malamar into Shadow Drapion. I'm just going to stay in the matchup, and if they're not going to throw, I'm going straight for the Superpower. I just want damage onto this Pokemon. Superpower is going to land, in comes Empoleon, and Empoleon is going to do a pretty nice job at absorbing this energy. Drapion, I'm expecting them to try and catch out of this, so I actually don't end up throwing, and they do, they send in Jellicent. Now this is not a great spot to be as the Empoleon player, however, I did need to bait this Pokemon out. I'm just going to try and overfarm as much as I possibly can with this Empoleon, because if my opponent tries to farm me down, I should actually make a third Drill Peck and force a shield, and that's exactly what happens. My opponent lost count of the energy, and that will come back to bite them. Drill Peck is going to be shielded. In comes Malamar, and unfortunately, they have 100 energy on this Jellicent. They go for the double surf as it is going to be the most efficient way to get rid of me. If there's any consolation, the Drapion has a move, but I think the Drapion might be in one Bug Bite range. It's going to be very, very close. My opponent reveals their final Pokemon is going to be Empoleon, and this will be a pretty good test of Sand Tomb. A Sand Tomb now does actual damage. I remember last season you could throw like 3 Sand Tombs at a Unova Stunfisk, and Stunfisk would still be alive. But the Sand Tomb actually adds up quite a bit on super effective targets. The game will come down to this. Is my opponent in a range where one Bug Bite will KO the Drapion? If yes, then I will win the game. If not, then unfortunately I'm going to lose. Empoleon is able to force the final Protect Shield out from the Fortress. It all comes down to this. My opponent sends in the Jellicent, I make the double Sand Tomb, and now my opponent cannot afford to shield. They just have to hope that Drapion will be able to survive the Bug Bite. Drapion falls to the Bug Bite, and we escape with the win, despite honestly not playing as well as we should have. Pretty nice lead in the next match, Malamar into Annihilate, although this matchup is not as comfortable as it used to be. You used to be able to pretty comfortably destroy Annihilate, but now Annihilate can threaten insane damage with close combat. Low kick is just absolutely terrifying. I do get the shield call right as they go for the close combat, and my opponent save switches into Whiscash. It's actually the Shadow Whiscash at that, and I send in Forretress. Forretress's Bug Bites will melt through the Whiscash. I believe in this matchup I actually make a pretty big error, and that is not throwing the Sand Tomb instantly. I overfarm, and this is just for no reason. I should always fire off the Sand Tomb right away because I want to try and ramp up my Bug Bite damage as much as humanly possible. Sand Tomb is going to land. That's going to help me do extra damage, but my opponent actually ends up farming me down because I didn't throw sooner. That's a pretty big error on my part. They pivot out of the Whiscash back into the Annihilate, but I can go for the foul play and knock them out. They do have energy loaded on the Whiscash. I am just going to take one shield Empoleon to the endgame. Scald will do big damage. Empoleon gets the Metal Sound down. What do they have in back? Unfortunately, I'm never going to know, as they will resign the match. Picking up a very bad lead in the next match, Malamar into Greninja. I save switch into Empoleon, and my opponent will stay in and fire off Night Slash. I am very happy with this. I would rather take this energy on the Empoleon than anywhere else. Greninja makes a pretty big error as they end up throwing on alignment. I still do not have to respect this because Night Slash, while it will get me very low, it will not get me low enough to the point where I can't make both moves. So I fire off the Drill Peck. I'm going to throw one at a Drill Peck once again, but my opponent tries to snipe with Corviknight. But Sand Attack, even though it's super effective, does not take the knockout. I'm able to save that Empoleon on 1 HP and send in the Malamar. Malamar is immediately greeted with an Air Cutter, my opponent fishing for a boost that they're not going to get. I know Corviknight is not quite in foul play range just yet. I'm going to tank one, shield one, and then look to try and Psywave them into range. So I farm up to the back-to-back foul plays, and I have quite a bit of energy to threaten that Greninja when it comes back in. Foul play plus the Psywave down is going to take the knockout. In the back, they have Clodsire, and this game is already over. They're bringing in Clodsire to absorb energy, but little do they know, I have an incredibly hard counter to Greninja in the back with the Forretress. So my opponent is more than happy to let these foul plays go. They only hit for neutral, but at this range, I can just bug bite it down with my Forretress and win the game. The Malamar has definitely done its job. In comes Forretress for cleanup duty. In comes the Greninja, and Greninja is just getting melted. Man, Forretress felt very, very strong in this battle. We pick up a very nice lead in the next match, Malamar into Dugong. Now, unfortunately here, I had another one of those weird lags where I end up missing a turn on the middle of the field. Luckily, my game was able to catch back up, but we have the spinny ball of death at the top, and that is not what you want to see when battling. They no-shield the first, but a superpower would actually KO on the second, so they're forced to burn a shield. And I'm going to take advantage of the fact that they just have too much energy. They were able to throw at a very predictable time, and that allows me to catch an Icy Wind onto my Empoleon. In comes Drifblim. Drifblim, not going to be a big fan of these Hydro Cannon. Even though they are debuffed, they still do a ton of damage to the Drifblim. Drifblim farming up. If they try and farm down, I think I can actually make a third Hydro. This is Hydro Cannon number 2. I think that I will barely survive 2 Astonishes, and my opponent knows it. They're forced to throw energy. Drifblim goes for the Icy Wind. It does not knock out, and I pivot aggressively into the Malamar. I just didn't want to concede the farm down, and this way I can save Empoleon for a catch. Drifblim debuffs me and then sends in the Dugong. I'm going from full attack to -2 in a split second. Here, I'm just going to farm up as much as humanly possible. If my opponent has a 3-turn duration fast move or greater in the back, I will get a second move. Superpower will take the knockout. They do have a 3-turn move in the back. It's Wigglytuff, and I make Superpower number 2. That's not going to do much, but they meet the brick wall that is Forretress. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. Malamar into Altaria. This is a pretty big core breaker for this team. If either the Altaria or the Malamar is Shadow, then the matchup favors Malamar, and that's because you get a Psywave breakpoint. However, when both the Altaria and the Malamar are non-Shadow, that does mean that you don't get the Psywave breakpoint, and Altaria actually just completely destroys you. Altaria is able to land the Sky Attack. They're going to be able to absorb 2 foul plays, farm down, and exit with a charge attack loaded. So this matchup is not great, but I'm trusting in the fact that my Forretress will do well in the back. I'm going to have to tank a move on the Empoleon. My opponent blind switches a Clefable, and that is not what you want to do. To be fair, their Clefable was going to be doing absolutely nothing into this backline, but Clefable, not a recommended safe swap, and they end up firing what can only be a Meteor Mash at my Empoleon. If they're throwing Meteor Mashes at the Empoleon, then there's a very real chance they're Meteor Mash Swift, and that is just a tragic moveset to have in this scenario. In the back, my opponent has a Marowak, and clearly they did not see that Marowak is no longer nearly as good as it once was. It's not even the Shadow Marowak either, it's the regular Marowak. But Marowak, whether it's Shadow or not, the Mud Slap damage just does not do what you want it to do. The thing I have to be mindful of in this endgame scenario is the fact that my opponent has a Sky Attack loaded on the Altaria. So even though I have 2 shields, I'm going to have to start using them. And the moment that my opponent gets the final shield, it's pretty high odds that they'll probably try and go for a combo play. The good news for me, though, is that my switch clock should be up when that time occurs. I fire off the Sand Tomb with the Marowak. This is going to be pressuring the final shield. I debated going for the catch onto Empoleon here, but I realized that I can just shield, and now I'm switching into the Empoleon. Because they should go for the combo play with the Altaria, we get the catch, and that's just going to win the game. It turns out they actually had a Flamethrower, but Forretress just gets the Bug Bite down everything. We Bug Bite down Altaria, Bug Bite down the Marowak, and take the win. We pick up a pretty nice lead in the next match, Malamar into Primeape. Primeape going to be staying in. These Psywaves are adding up. Primeape bangs to close combat, save switches into Togekiss, and I have nothing for this Pokemon. When it came to team building, I was not thinking about Togekiss, and I am triple weak. You can't even send in Empoleon to a Togekiss that's up energy, because they just survive the Metal Sounds and make 3 Aura Spheres. So I'm forced to stay in with the Malamar, but I'm really not in a good spot. My Foul Play plus Psywave damage adds up a lot on the Togekiss, but there's an entire close combat banked on a Primeape. What am I going to do about that? Aura Sphere lands, Malamar barely hangs on, in comes Empoleon, and my opponent sends back in the Primeape. Primeape will always full send a close combat, so I decide to just take it to the Zero Shield. I'm going to get the final shield from my opponent, and I'm just going to trust that in the zeros, my Forretress will be able to win this game. My opponent makes a very smart play of letting themselves get as low as humanly possible before delivering the knockout with the close combat. That's only going to give me a very small head start on the Forretress. So now, Forretress is up a little bit of energy, my opponent waits the timer, and in comes Jellicent. And this actually looks like a winnable game. Jellicent's going to inflict some pretty significant damage, but I can go for a combination play, once I fire off some damage onto this Jellicent. So I go for the Rock Tomb. I do have a foul play available on the Malamar. Rock Tomb lands. There's the snipe into the Malamar, but the Hex damage did land because it did a Bug Bite and then switched. And that Hex damage means I only get one Psy Wave. It's going to be close. Bug Bite versus Peck, and they survive. They make the move, and that's going to win them the game. Maybe I needed to Sand Tomb and then go for the foul play. If I did that, maybe there was a better chance. But unfortunately, I did not. I went for the Rock Tomb, and I just missed the farm down, and I just did not have enough energy for a Sand Tomb. We moved to the final match, looking for a bit of redemption after that last one. My opponent genuinely played that so incredibly well. Banking the close combat and then going Togekiss put so much pressure on my team, and I was really left searching for answers. I try for a Twister catch onto Empoleon. My opponent does not let that happen, but they send in a Azumarill. I'm very happy to see the Azumarill here. My guess is my opponent is correctly identifying that Azumarill was going to be pretty useless in the back against the Malamar lead team, so they're just kind of throwing away the Azumarill here. Play Rough does still do some pretty sizable damage, and with all the metal sounds, it's getting to a point where they're very close to double Drill Peck range. Drill Peck is going to connect onto the Azumarill. I have to hope this Drill Peck is going to be enough. If it's not, I could potentially try and snipe them with a Psy Wave. I switch into the Malamar, but they switch as well. They send in Shadow Steelix. Shadow Steelix definitely would have been the better bring to the Empoleon, but then they just get swept by the Forretress, so I think either way they were in a very, very difficult spot. Superpower connecting kind of just ends this game, because now my opponent is forced to shield foul plays. They try for the farm down, but the Malamar energy just completely overwhelms them. Foul play takes the knockout, and in that position, my opponent will resign the match. After trying out Forretress, I really feel like Forretress is going to be a pretty staple Pokemon this season. What I like about Forretress is it almost feels like a Swiss Army knife, where you can use a wide variety of different tech with it and still have pretty nice success. Whether you opt for Bug Bite, whether you opt for Volt Switch, the regular Forretress, or the Shadow, you can kind of pretty consistently ditch Earthquake, and I think that is a really nice plus. Because Earthquake Rock Tomb ended up being kind of an inconsistent hit or miss bait game, whereas with Rock Tomb and Sand Tomb, you have significantly better pacing to your ground damage, and even against the Pokemon like Empoleon, Sand Tomb actually adds up a lot more this season, which is a very big plus for Forretress, especially if you're running Bug Bite. As far as the Volt Switch variant, being able to debuff your opponent's defense and then just increase your already pretty significant Volt Switch damage does make Forretress a pretty scary pick. So right off the bat, I do think that they did the correct thing in reducing the damage on Rock Tomb, because this thing would have been even more of a nightmare if it still had the full power on Rock Tomb. I wouldn't be surprised if, knowing they were buffing Sand Tomb, that's part of why they reduced the damage on Rock Tomb, just to make sure that Forretress wasn't beating absolutely everything. But for now, I really liked Forretress. Malamar as well felt really, really strong. With Shadow Scizor kind of going by the wayside, Malamar felt like it had some pretty consistent matchups across the board, and if the meta ends up shaking out to where Malamar can again do neutral things, I will be very, very happy, as the last Malamar meta we had was one that I really enjoyed. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed watching today's video, please do leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you have not. And an extra special thank you, as always, to the channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is genuinely so appreciated. So thank you guys so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.